to be talking about understanding points, lines, and planes. So our learning target is to define and label point, line, line segment, ray, plane, collinear, and coplanar. So for each word, we're going to have a picture, notation, and definition. So our first one is a point. So we could draw a picture, point A. Notation is with a capital letter, and it names a location and has no size. Then we have a line. A line has multiple different ways it can be notated. So we can draw a line and use two capital letters, so MN, or they could be written in opposite order, NM, or we can use the lowercase cursive letter and call this line L. A line is a straight path that has no endpoints and extends forever. Okay, so extends forever in both directions. Next, we have a plane, which will typically have points in it. For notation, we can say plane and use 3 points, so plane A, B, C. Or there will be a capital cursive letter sometimes in the plane. So in this case, we could also call it plane R. Okay, so it just depends on what it shows in the picture. And this is a flat surface that has no thickness and extends forever in both directions. Really in all directions. Okay, our next term is collinear. So we're going to draw a line and we're going to place some points on it. So there's not really any notation for this. We would just list the points. So the points that are collinear are K, L, and M, and that is because they are points that lie on the same line. So points that lie on the same line are collinear. Keep in mind that the word line is in the word collinear, so that can help you remember that. Next, we have coplanar. So we would draw a plane, and we would have some points in it. Okay, same with collinear. It doesn't really have notation. You would just list the points that are coplanar. And these are points that lie in the same plane. So keep in mind the word plane, right? Coplanar, plane is in there, so that can help you remember what it means. Points that lie on the same plane. Next, we have a line segment. A line segment is notated with a line segment, so no arrows, and 2 letters. And just like with a line, you can name those letters in either order. So either OK, line segment OK, or line segment KO. And this is part of a line consisting of 2 endpoints and all the points between them. Okay, so it's part of a line. So it ends on both sides. An endpoint is just a point at one end of a segment or the starting point of a ray. So, for example, in the previous one, O and K are both examples of endpoints. Then we have a ray, so we can draw an array. Okay, and we would have to name this one ray JK. So notice there's only one arrow in my notation because there's only one arrow on the ray. And in this one, it does matter what order you put the letters in because it's only extending forever in the one direction towards K. So the arrow has to be by the K when we notate it. And this is part of a line that starts at an endpoint and extends forever in one direction. Okay, and that's how a ray is different from a line. Only extends forever in one direction. And then lastly, we have opposite rays, which could look something like this. Okay, so our opposite rays go in two different directions. So one ray is JL, going in the direction towards L. And its opposite ray, which goes in the other direction, JK. Notice how they both start from J, okay, because they're opposite from that same point. Okay, so these are two rays that have a common endpoint. Okay, so in our case, we said J is that common endpoint, and they form a line. So keep in mind, these two rays together form the line KL. That's one way we could name it. Okay, so we're going to do some practice, some examples, drawing and labeling and naming. So the first one says to draw and label a diagram, point W. Okay, so we know points always have a capital letter, so we can label it with a W. Then we have line MN, so we know we're going to have a line which has arrows on both sides, and since its name is MN, there must be 2 points on the line, one M and one N. Then we're going to name each figure using words and symbols. So PK has 2 endpoints, which means it is a line segment. So we'd use a segment, and the 2 points are PK, or remember we could write it as KP. Either way is fine. The next one, number 4, we have a ray, because we only have one arrow and one endpoint, so it's extending forever towards R. And one way we could name this is PK, or we could also name it PR, or we could name it KR. Keeping in mind that R is always that second letter, because we're going in the direction of R. So there's a few different ways we can name it, but making sure either R or K is after P. And then lastly, number 5, we have a plane. And there are 3 points in it, so we can call it plane LMN, or we have this cursive Q, so we could also call it plane Q. Next, we're going to go over some postulates. Okay, and a postulate is an accepted statement of truth, which means there's no need to prove, which is great. So our postulates for this section, we're going to fill in the blanks and draw a picture to represent each postulate. So through any 2 points, there is exactly one line. So if we plot 2 points, C and D, there's only one line that can go through both of those points. If 2 lines intersect, then they intersect at exactly 1 point. Okay, so we have 2 lines. They intersect at 1 point. Call it P. If 2 planes intersect, then they intersect at exactly 1 line. And this is a bit harder to draw. So if we have 2 planes, we have 1 plane here. Then we have another plane that cuts through. Right? They intersect at just this 1 line. Okay, it'd be like if you had 2 pieces of paper going through each other. They only intersect at 1 line. And lastly, through any three non-collinear points, there is exactly one plane. So if we have points A, B, and C, right? Can't be collinear. There is exactly one plane. Okay, and then it'd be a good time for you to practice. So you might want to pause at this point, go through examples 2 and 3, and then check your work afterwards. Okay, so name the figure in 2 different ways. We could name it line W, because we see that cursive lowercase w, or we can use our symbol, so our line symbol, and OK. B, that's a plane, so we could either call it plane H, or we can use the points and call it plane PLS. Then we have another line, few different ways we could name it. So we have, or really we could think about it as opposite rays since we have J in the middle. So we could think about it as ray JL and ray JR. So we have those opposite rays. You could also have thought about it as a line, right? And you could have called it line RL. That'd be another option. And lastly, we have point G, right? It's just a point. So we can just use the capital letter G. Okay, and lastly, we're going to identify each of the following in this picture, keeping in mind that there will be multiple answers for some of these. So 3 collinear points. Well, I need to find a line, so I'm highlighting that in yellow. So one option would be points A, B, and C, since those are all on the same line. 3 non-collinear points, well, I'd have to take points from the different lines. So I have, F is over here, E is up here, those aren't on the same line, and C. So those would be 3 non-collinear points. So F, E, and C. 4 coplanar points. Okay, well, when we look at this, sorry, I'm going to erase some of that highlighting. This is our plane here. So 4 coplanar points, well, they have to be in this section. So that would be F, A, B, and C. Okay, E and D are not on that plane. 4 non-coplanar points. Okay, well, we said here's our plane. These are coplanar. So, for example, F would be non-coplanar with D and E, since those are not in the plane. And since those are not coplanar, we could choose any other point to make it non-coplanar. Okay, a line that intersects line CA. Well, we have this line here. So we have line ED, we could call it. Could also call it line EB or line M. And lastly, opposite rays. For this one, I'm going to use the green line I've highlighted, so line AB. And I'm going to use B as that center point, that common endpoint between the rays. And so we'd have ray BA and ray BC. Keeping in mind that B is the common endpoint, then both of my rays need to start with B.